The United Auto Workers Union strike is now in its 6th day. At present, there are no signs of a breakthrough. The union's president is threatening to expand the strike unless serious progress is made by noon Friday. The White House originally planned to send 2 top administration officials to Detroit to assist in the negotiations, but that is all now on hold. CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa joins us now. Robert, this has become a little ticklish for the White House in ways I don't think the White House initially expected. When the president gave his remarks Friday, which we covered in a special report here at CBS News, he said record profits should result in a record contract, but he also added parenthetically, I'm going to send 2 administration officials there to help out, thinking that was just sort of what you might do in a circumstance like this. Then word came to the White House. The UAW said, what are you talking about? That looks to us like you're trying to put the thumb on the scale for the auto companies, not us. And now there's talk, well, should the president get on the picket line and do all this other demonstrative stuff? The politics have gotten suddenly tricky.
And they're especially tricky for President Joe Biden, who, going back to his election to the Senate in 1972, has had such a link with labor in this country. That has been the backbone of his political
Calls
career.
himself the most pro-labor president in American history.
And most of his political rallies are populated by members of the labor movement. And so he wants to make sure in the place like the industrial heartland of the country that those workers who are out on the picket line or supportive of those out on the picket line remain in the Biden camp because we're in election season.
Right. Let's take a look at some numbers I pulled together from the U.S. Census Bureau on union membership in some key electoral vote-rich states. Let's look at Michigan. 14% now. Back in 1989, it was 29%. You can look at the contrast. Pennsylvania, 12.7%. Wisconsin, 7.1%. That's 44 electoral votes there. You had Ohio, 12.8%, all down from 1989, but still important. Now, not all of those union members are obviously auto workers, but they might be generally sympathetic. That's something that the president's got to pay attention to.
And he is paying attention to it. And by talking about having his officials go to Michigan, that's a sign that he wants to have fingerprints over the decision here, over the negotiation.
And the ultimate deal, because we know there's going to be a deal. We just don't know when. And then hovering around all of this, former President Trump. What's the angle there?
Based on our conversations with Trump associates and advisors, they expect Trump to go to Michigan, to Detroit, next Wednesday at the same time of the Republican primary debate in Simi Valley, California, at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. This is Trump's efforts to try to compete with President Biden to make this about a general election dynamic, not a primary dynamic at this stage in the race.
And the former president has said some things that don't stand up to economic scrutiny, but they might work politically in the sense that one of the issues for the strike is the transition from electric vehicles, from combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles. Fewer people are required on the assembly lines to build electric vehicles. Trump says, we're not going to even make any of these. China's going to make all of them in 3 years. You're not going to have any jobs. Well, the fact is, more people are buying electric vehicles now than did a year ago. The trend lines there are continuing. Those jobs aren't going to disappear. But that doesn't really matter, it seems, in the former president's rhetoric. What he wants to say is something bad might happen to you, and I'm the one who can protect you from it.
And that's a typical Trump approach. The complicated politics on the right side of the country are really intriguing to watch because there's an aversion to any kind of climate-friendly policy when it comes to automobiles and manufacturing among many Republicans. At the same time, one of their heroes now on the right is Elon Musk, and who runs Tesla.
Tesla, right.
And electric cars are part of this social media company, at least in a tangential way, X, that has been a real place for Republicans to have a gathering place.
And part of the competition that Ford, Stellantis, and General Motors have to be aware of because Tesla's non-union and they're in the EV market and they're going to stay there. And that's a growing part of the U.S. auto market.
It's going to be fascinating to watch what Trump says exactly about the strike. Does he just make overtures to workers generally and talk about foreign policy in China in the context of economic policy in the Midwest? Or does he really take a position next Wednesday that makes news alongside the Republican debate?
And Robert, what does it mean to you that that choice is more important than being at the second debate?
For Trump, being at the second debate would be a sign of weakness. Talking to those who know him well, they say he just does not want to elevate the field by having himself on stage. Now, Trump's rivals would contest that characterization of Trump's appearance. They think he's being cowardly. Christie has said that, the former New Jersey governor, by not being there. But Trump believes if he was there, he'd bring a spotlight not only onto him, but onto others there. He wants to keep them politically suffocated as long as possible.
One last thing very quickly on the White House side of this. I've talked to people at the White House who say, look, Trump can wade into this all he wants. He has a terrible worker protection record. The manufacturing record isn't all that solid. We look out for workers, and our record reflects it. They seem to want to wade into a little bit of this if Trump gets deeper into it.
And it's probably politically necessary, because when I think back to 2016 and going across Pennsylvania, I drove across Pennsylvania, drove across Wisconsin and Ohio. Even those diehard labor Democrats sometimes heard the song of Trump's rhetoric, whether it was on cultural issues or just grievances on different fronts, and they identified with it. In particular, the messaging Trump has had on China for years, and that is always a threat to a Democrat like President Biden, who believes, yes, labor is organized for them, but they know when they get into that ballot booth that they could go the other way.
And the Democratic regret after 2016 was sleeping on that and not being aggressive there. Robert Costa, always a great pleasure to talk to you.